Okay, so in the Torah portion of Vayakhel, we read how Moshe Rabbeinu gathers the Jewish people and encourages them to donate to the Mishkan. Actually, before that, he tells them not to observe the Shabbos. And the fact that he says that right before he tells them about building the Mishkan teaches us that we cannot build the Mishkan on Shabbos. And that also teaches us that the building of the Mishkan involved Shabbos desecration, which is how we learn various laws of Shabbos from there. And then, of course, he tells the Jewish people who the builders are going to be of the Mishkan. And then he tells them exactly what they need to build. And this parsha is the Baal Koreh's dream. The Baal Koreh is the one who reads the Torah in shul, because he basically doesn't have to practice it since he already read pretty much everything in this parsha already 2 weeks ago in Parshas Teruma, where this command was given to Moshe. And here it's just, so to speak, being passed on to the Jewish people. Why it has to be repeated? Well, that's for another class. But the class today is going to discuss the last two halachas, the last two laws in the Rambam's Hilchas Beis HaBechira. The Rambam has 8 chapters called the Laws of the Chosen House. And that is the first set of laws in his book of Avodah. Avodah means service, divine service. And that's referring to the service in the Beis HaMikdash. And that's all the sacrifices and so on. But he starts with the laws of the Beis HaMikdash itself, focusing mostly on the building of the Beis HaMikdash and what that looked like, and all of the different vessels in the Beis HaMikdash. So, the laws of the daily service are separate, by the way. There's a separate section called Hilchas Tamidin Umusafin, the laws of the Tamid and the Musaf. And that's where it talks about the daily service and what happened on a daily basis. But despite this separation of the different topics, at the end of the 8th chapter, the Rambam does talk a little bit about the daily service as it happened every morning in the Beis HaMikdash. And here we go. B'shachar, in the morning. Koidem, I sent out the handout this morning, so I hope everybody got it. B'shachar, in the morning. Koidem sheyala amud hashachar, before dawn. Samochloi, close to dawn. Yavayam amuna shel HaMikdash, the one who was in charge of the Beis HaMikdash, like the Kohen who was in charge of the daily activities of the Beis HaMikdash, would come. The Yidpoik ala Koyanim shebebeis HaMoiked, and he would knock to awaken the Koyanim in the Beis HaMoiked, that's the place where they slept. They would open the door for him. Not also mafteach, he would take the key. Upasach hasashar hakotan, and he would open the small entrance, shebein Beis HaMoiked uveina azara, that was between that large room where they would sleep and the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. So he didn't open the large gate, a large entranceway, just a small entranceway where he could get in to the courtyard with the Koyanim. V'nichnas mi Beis HaMoiked la'azar, he would go from that room into the courtyard. V'nichnasu acharav HaKoyanim, and the Koyanim would follow him. Ushtei avukas shel ur biyadam, and there were 2 torches of fire in their hands. V'nechlaku l'shtei kitas, and they would break up into 2 groups, each one with 1 torch, obviously. Kate leches lemizrach, vekate leches lema'arav. One group would go to the east, which was a left turn from where they were coming, and one would go to the west, which is a right turn from where they're coming. They would check as they walked throughout the Azora until they met at the spot where they would make the chavitin. The chavitin were rolls that were made every day, half of which were sacrificed in the morning by the Kohen Gadol, and half of which were sacrificed in the evening. Higiu elu va'elu, when they both reached that spot, Oimrim, they would say, Shalom, Hakol Shalom, peace. Everything is peace. Meaning to say, there's no problem. We can start the daily service. And they would get the chavitin maker to start his work. Okay, so far so good? Any questions? Yes.
Who created this? Who created the system, and what was the symbolics of it?
Who created the system is an interesting question. If I had to guess, it was probably created by the first groups of Kohanim who started doing their service in the Beis HaMikdash. They probably made a system of how to check the Beis HaMikdash in the morning. This is basically what they're doing. They're checking in the morning to make sure everything is in place. Exactly why they did it in this particular way, I would imagine that they had some input from the rabbis. We have to remember the Sanhedrin, which is the high court of the land, was located in the Beis HaMikdash, actually not far from the Beis HaMoked where the Kohanim would sleep. So they would consult the top rabbis in the country for their daily procedures and questions. I imagine that the rabbis of the Sanhedrin had a hand in this whole system and setup, but I could not tell you exactly or precisely.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting. And is the small entrance was just for a security point, security reasons? Why was the person who was coming inside in the courtyard had to go through very small openings? Was it because it was easier to protect
Well,
the
I
inside?
think basically that the large entrance was not opened until they were ready to open the Beis HaMikdash to the public. It was too early to open it to the public. So the large entrance was simply not appropriate to open at that point. They opened a small entrance just because, for utilitarian purposes, they had to get in. But they didn't open the main entrances until the day actually was light and they were ready to accept, visitors, so to speak.
That the Sanhedrin had, technically bigger power than the high priests. That they were actually serving the decisions of Sanhedrin and main rabbis. Is it
Correct.
right? Is that
is
okay?
Correct. The high priest could be a rabbi himself. Presumably, he was a learned man. But the final halachic rulings would come from the Sanhedrin, and the Kohanim would have to follow those rulings, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Very good. I'm going to mute everybody if you don't mind.
Yeah, please. Yeah,
unmute
background
as you
noise.
see fit. Very good. Okay. And now we come to the final halacha, the final law in this section of the Rambam. Kaseder hazeh oisen b'chol laila v'laila. They followed this order on every single night. Chutz milele Shabbos, besides Friday night, she'ein biyadam ur, they had no fire in their hands. Ela boitkin baneris hadlukin sham me erev Shabbos. Instead, they would use the candles, the lamps that were lit from before Shabbos. So before Shabbos began on Friday night, they would go around putting up lamps at various points throughout the Beis Hamikdash, lamps that had at least 12 hours of fuel in them, so that when the Kohanim would pass by those areas the next morning, Shabbos morning, there would be enough light for them to see what was going on and make sure everything was in order. And that's because when they were doing this, it was still dark. This was done koidem sheyala amud hashachar, before dawn. Even when it is dawn, it's still very dark. Dawn is just the first beginning of the light, but it's still too dark to really see much. And this was even before dawn, so it was really pitch black. And they were not carrying the torches on Shabbos. So the lights, the lamps were set up before Shabbos. Okay, so that's how the Rambam finishes. By the way, usually when the Rambam finishes a set of laws, he usually puts in a little bit like of an inspirational halacha, just to finish off on a good note. Here it does seem a little bit technical, not so much of an inspiration, but maybe we'll learn some inspiration from this soon. Okay, if you have any questions, now is a good time before I ask the Rebbe's question. Go ahead, David. I can see you got something.
I have nothing.
No? Okay.
I'm just smiling because I like you.
Okay, so I'm going to lead you to the question. Why couldn't they hold the lamps on Shabbos?
Because it's muksa.
Because it's muktzah.
Because you're liable to do something to make the lights go higher or lower or put them out.
That is correct. Holding a lamp on Shabbos is muktzah. Fire is muktzah. And you're not allowed to move muktzah on Shabbos. Absolutely correct. It's not muktzah on Yom Tov, by the way. Notice how the Rambam leaves out Yom Tov. Because on Yom Tov, fire is not muktzah. And it's fine to move fire, so they had no reason to set up lamps before Yom Tov. They used the torches on Yom Tov. Okay, is that a Torah law or a rabbinic law? The fact that you cannot carry fire on Shabbos.
And you're not supposed to do any kind of work that has to do with work of the Beis Hamikdash. And here is the work of the Beis Hamikdash.
Right, you're not allowed to light a fire, but what if the fire was lit before and you're just carrying it? What is that? Is that Torah level or rabbinic level?
I think it might be a fence around.
Exactly.
I think so.
That's correct. It's called muktzah. When you carry something that you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos, I'm not talking about carrying in a public domain, carrying in a private domain, an object that is a forbidden use object, like fire, which is highly forbidden to use, to ignite, to cook with, to add to put out. It's not even an object fire, it's just kind of a thing. I don't know how to describe it, but it doesn't even have the status of an object halachically. So it's actually something that is very muktzah. It is set aside from being moved on Shabbos. And that's the reason you can't carry the torch. Okay, so here I've led you to the question, and the question is, there is a principle that ein shvus b'migdash. There is no application of rabbinic law regarding Shabbos in the Beis Hamikdash. The rabbis did not apply the rabbinic laws of Shabbos to the Beis Hamikdash because they just didn't. There's too many restrictions to be able to effectively do what had to be done at the Beis Hamikdash. So they just gave everybody a pass. At the Beis Hamikdash, in matters of the Beis Hamikdash, I'm not talking about in your private, stuff that you happen to do when you're standing there. But in all matters relating to the Beis Hamikdash, the rabbis did not make their laws regarding Shabbos. I shouldn't say they didn't make them. They didn't apply them. I'll give you several examples. Okay? The Kohen Gadol was supposed to stay up on the night of Yom Kippur. He was not supposed to fall asleep at all. To make sure this would happen, they would read in front of him, interesting parts of the Tanakh. They would read the book of Daniel. They would read the book of Eov, I think it says. I don't remember exactly. But, sometimes people fall asleep, even if you're telling them a good story. And if he would perhaps start to nod off, makin lefanav be'etzbat sreda. They would snap their fingers to wake him up. You're not allowed to snap your fingers on Shabbos because that's considered making music. The truth is that the prohibition is talking about snapping them in a musical way, like to a beat or whatever. But whatever it is, they did that in order to wake the Kohen Gadol. Now, you could say, well, why didn't they wake him in some other way? Why didn't they just tap him on the back, give him a little shake, shout in his ear? No, they snapped their fingers because the prohibition of snapping fingers on Shabbos is a rabbinic violation. The whole thing is that if you play music on Shabbos, even the music associated with snapping fingers, that could lead to actually making a musical instrument. Now, of course, you're not going to make a violin on Shabbos just because you snap your fingers, but maybe you'll make a more simple type of instrument. And the rabbis wanted to protect to make sure that wouldn't happen. So they said you can't snap your fingers. You're also not supposed to clap for that reason in a musical way. Clapping when you're singing a song during davening perhaps is an exception, but generally you're not supposed to in a musical manner. Same concept. So here we come. Okay, I'll give you another example. Ready?
Question.
Yes.
Could you touch the Kohen Gadol while he's wearing his clothing specifically for while he's working in the Beit Hamikdash?
Well, I mean, all the Kohanim who were in the Beis Hamikdash had to be tahar. They had to be tahar. They had to be ritually pure. No one was allowed to come into the Beis Hamikdash if they were not. And if they became ritually impure in the Beis Hamikdash, which is possible, they would have to go out. So in terms of touching the Kohen, I don't see any reason why not. I mean, I understand what you're getting at, that perhaps they didn't want to shake him because they didn't want to make him tameh. But I didn't come across any opinion that you're not allowed to touch him. Again, assuming that the person who's doing the touching is pure, which the Kohanim were. He wasn't wearing the garments, by the way. He wasn't wearing the garments at night because he would only wear the garments when he would serve in the Beis Hamikdash. So he would put them on in the morning. At night, he wore his pajamas or whatever else he would wear, but not his shmoina begodim, as they're called, not his 8 special Kohen garments, nor the white ones that he would wear when he entered the Holy of Holies. Those he would put on in the morning. Okay, I'll give you another example. of Ein Shvus B'Migdash. There is no prohibition. There is no rabbinic Shabbos prohibitions applied in the Beis Hamikdash. Also the Kohen Gadol, and also on Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur morning would have to go into the mikvah. Now, of course, he was already separated from his family for 7 days before. So he was in a heightened state of purity. He was not touching anybody outside the Beis Hamikdash grounds for those 7 days. And therefore, he was absolutely pure. But nevertheless, as an extra precaution, he would immerse in the mikveh in the morning before he put on his Kohen Gadol clothes. And then again, every time he would change his clothes from the golden clothes, which is what they called the 8 clothes because they had gold in them, to the white clothes of the Holy of Holies. Every time he changed his clothes, he would go to the mikveh. 5 times he went to the mikveh on Yom Kippur. If the Kohen Gadol was old or sickly, and the water of the mikveh might be cold, it's not quite winter on Yom Kippur time, but could be chilly. They would have hot metal rods. Those were heated from before Yom Kippur, but they would take those hot metal rods and they would plunge them into the water to warm the mikveh, so he shouldn't get sick or catch a cold from the cold mikveh. Now, plunging a hot metal rod into water on Shabbos to heat it up is forbidden by rabbinic law, because a hot metal rod, a red hot metal rod, is considered like fire by rabbinic law. And extinguishing that fire is forbidden. It's not forbidden by Torah law because you can't relight it in a better manner. And for it to be forbidden in a Torah law would have to make some kind of coal, which you could then relight. That doesn't apply to metal. So it's only rabbinic, but it's still forbidden by rabbinic law. Now, there are other ways to heat up a mikveh in a permissible way. Why didn't they just have a hot water, pot of hot water on the side and pour it in to warm it up? No, they threw in the hot metal rods and they did not worry about the fact that that was a rabbinic violation, because, as we said, Ein Shvus B'Migdash, there is no application of the rabbinic Shabbos laws in the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore we come back to the question, why did they not have the 2 groups of Kohanim who were checking out the courtyard on Shabbos morning carry the torches? Why do they have to go through the bother of setting up lamps all around the Beis Hamikdash to prevent them from having to carry the torches, when carrying the torches is only rabbinic and it should be perfectly fine to do in the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos? Okay, that's the question. I rest my case.
It might actually accidentally be put out by a wind gust or anything like that. Then there might be.
That's true, but that's not intentional. A person who's carrying
you can't light it anymore.
Okay, that's true. That's true. Maybe they should have a backup or 2.
Rabbi?
Could have a backup or 2. You won't be able to light it. That's true. Once it's out, it's gone. So you're saying practically it's easier to just light them in advance. If you have to light so many in advance as a backup, you may as well have them on the wall. I hear you, but just to keep like the normal seder of the day, the normal order of the day, why not just, have torches lit on the side, maybe an extra torch or 2, and that's it.
Rabbi?
Yes.
The rods were preferable over hot water, as you said, because they didn't use hot water. Were they concerned that the hot water may become defiled or become tuma because maybe somebody might do something to maybe drink from it, or they might maybe spit in it, or just for reasons of is that a possibility?
So it's actually two methods of heating up the water that are both acceptable. I'm going to read the quote that the Rebbe quotes. Haya kohen gadol zaken or choyle. This is also from the Rambam in the laws of Yom Kippur. If the kohen gadol was old or sick, melabnin ashoshias shel barzal mibe'erev, they would heat up. An ashoshis is like a a rod of iron with fire from before. And they would throw it into the water the next day in order to warm the water a bit or to diminish the cold. Because there is no rabbinic prohibitions of Shabbos in the Beis Hamikdash. But he goes on, listen to this. Oi, or ma'arvin mayim cham b'mei mikvah. They could add hot water to the mikvah in order to diminish its coldness. So he actually gives both options. They could have done either one. Now, if either one is fine and acceptable, then why not just say, just do it the other way instead of getting involved in something that's rabbinically forbidden? Obviously, it's no problem at all, and therefore you could choose either way. The laws simply don't apply.
What
and therefore, you
happens?
have your choice.
But isn't there a problem of putting in water, which is mayim shuvin, into the mikveh, especially in a situation where where you are just at the 40 sa requirement, and that could be problematic?
Okay, so here is the law. I'm going to lay down the law. No, I'm just kidding. Here is the law. I hear what you're saying, but here's the law. Once a mikveh has the minimum amount of water, which is 40 sa, like you mentioned, you can add as much mayim shuvin as you want, as much drawn water as you want, and the mikveh remains kosher. Before you have 40 sa'ah, if you add as little as 3 lug, which is not a very large amount of water, and that water was drawn water, the mikveh is disqualified. But once you hit 40 sa'ah, you can add who knows how much, and it's still kosher. Now, there is an opinion that says that if you add and you take away, and you add and you take away, then you can only do it up to 50%. That is called nasan sa v'natal sa. If you add and take away, in other words, if you have a mikveh that's very tall and the water level is low, so you can add and add and add, then there's no limit. You can add from 40 sa of natural water, you can add 100 not natural, and it just gets higher and higher, and it's all kosher. If it only has 40 sa, and that's the lip, the water is reaching up to the lip. Actually, that's the problem anyway, because then the kohen gadol dips in it and the water goes out, so that's another problem. But let's say it's near the top, and you add so much so that more than 50% of the original water goes out, then some say that the mikveh is disqualified. But that's not the case over here. You don't have to add 51% of hot water. That's going to make it too hot anyway. Okay. So here's the concept. In general, we have to understand, why does the Rambam put the laws of the morning check on the Beis Hamikdash in the laws of the building of the Beis Hamikdash? That is something you would think belongs in the laws of the daily service in the Beis Hamikdash. The building is the building, and then once the building is built, and you get your, temporary certificate of occupation, and then your permanent or whatever it's called, and you start your operating. That's when you have to know the daily operations. But the laws of the building is building. So why is he telling us about what they would do every morning in the Beis Hamikdash? So the concept is that the whole 8th chapter of the laws of the Beis HaBechira, of the Beis Hamikdash, is about the guarding of the Beis Hamikdash. The Kohanim would guard the Beis Hamikdash in 3 places, and the Leviim would guard the Beis Hamikdash in 21 places. And the purpose of all these guards is not because they were afraid of enemies and people coming to steal stuff. That's not why. It was an honor guard. It's because when
Your audio is cutting out.
Sorry,
You said
yeah,
it's
that was a call
because
that came through. That was a
you said
call that came through.
You said
I'm
because
sorry?
and it was blank.
Yes, when they would guard the Beis Hamikdash, it was to honor the Beis Hamikdash. It wasn't to protect it from harm. It was to honor it. It's like the guards at Buckingham Palace. Those guards are not guarding the queen with their big, tall, furry hats and their muskets and bayonets and their shiny buttons. No, the queen is guarded because they have the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy and whatever other armies and the Secret Service or whatever they call it over there. Those are the real guards of the queen or the king now, or whatever it might be. But those guards in front of Buckingham Palace are honor guards because it shows how special this place is, that there's always a guard in front of it. So the same thing applied to the Beis Hamikdash. That's why the laws of the guarding the Beis Hamikdash belong in the laws of the building of the Beis Hamikdash, because the guarding of the Beis Hamikdash adds to the holiness of the place, because it shows how respectful the place must be and how honored it must be. Excuse me. In a similar way, we can say, the Rebbe says, that the same is true about the morning inspection. The purpose of the inspection was not so much to make sure that there was no missing goats or missing forks for the Mizbeach, or any intruders hiding in the corners. That's not really why they inspected it. They inspected it mostly, of course they would check for that, but that really wasn't what it was about. It was more of an honorable thing to show that this Beis Hamikdash is so important and so special that we keep track of every single detail in it. And that's why they did it in a very organized way. It wasn't just 1 or 2 Kainim, it was all the Kainim from that family group that was there that day. All of them would divide up, half here, half there, and they would then, when they finished, say a very ritualistic comment. Shalom, shalom, hakol shalom. Peace, peace, everything is peace. They didn't say, oh, everything is where it belongs, nothing's missing. Like they say in Hebrew, hakol beseder, everything is fine. No, they said peace, everything is peace. Because this was more of a ritual to emphasize that the Beis Hamikdash is in good working order, nothing to worry about. And this whole process brought honor to the Beis Hamikdash, which is why these halachas are brought in this part of which is why these halachas are brought in this part of the Rambam, because this is enhancing the holiness of the house. And therefore, these halachas belong in the section of the building of the house, because the building of the house is not just a physical building, it's building a place of honor and respect. And this daily inspection added to that honor and respect and can be considered almost like part of the building. Okay, so now we're going to go over to the Hanukkah story. And you're all thinking, like, what does Hanukkah have anything to do with this? Purim is around the corner. Hanukkah's already come and gone. What's going on here? Well, it has to do. Because the commentaries ask, why did Hashem have to make this whole miracle? They found the oil with the seal of the Kohen Gadol that lasted for 8 days, when there is a concept that is called Tuma Hutra B'tzibur, which means that when it comes to the public service in the Beis HaMikdash, as opposed to a private sacrifice, when it comes to a public sort of sacrifice in the Beis HaMikdash, those could be brought even in a state of impurity. If the Kohanim are impure, and that's all you have, they can bring the daily sacrifices, the communal daily sacrifices. If even the Israelites are impure, a majority of them, they can bring the Pesach sacrifice, because the concept is Tuma Hutra B'tzibur. The prohibitions against impurity are permitted in the case of communal sacrifice. So the same should apply to the lighting of the menorah. The oil was tameh, okay, that's fine. But Tuma Hutra B'tzibur. This is a communal sort of service, not a sacrifice, but it's a service in the Beis HaMikdash. And that Tuma, that impurity, is overridden in light of the necessity to bring a communal, mitzvah. We know that Hashem does not waste miracles. Hashem does miracles for a purpose. And if it's not a necessary purpose, one has to wonder, why did Hashem do this miracle? Maybe somebody answered this in one of your Hanukkah classes. Anybody? Anybody want to try? No? Leaving it all up to me? No, Mordechai, what do you say? Mordechai, you there?
He took his picture off, but had to step out.
Oh,
Yeah, I just stopped up for a minute. What were you asking?
why did Hashem have to do the miracle of the oil in the time of Hanukkah when Tuma Hutra B'tzibur, and you're allowed to do the communal service of the Beis HaMikdash in a state of impurity? Why not just use the impure oil and that's it? I mean, of course, we wouldn't really then have what to light and the whole menorah thing. How would we celebrate? Okay, but that's secondary. Why did Hashem have to do that miracle if we could have just used the impure oil? No?
Might be for spiritual reasons, that Hashem wanted everything to be pure, because the purity affected the outcome. it's not the physical purity, it's the spiritual purity, that it shouldn't be tainted with the impurity of the enemy.
It certainly is a
Rabbi?
spiritual thing,
Rabbi,
no question about it, but it's also a halachic thing, and they go together. Yes.
could it also been that? Well, the oil had to be tahara because even the Romans could come in and and use any oil, or we could get oil from any. They could have gotten oil from any source. The Greeks
Well, it
or
had
whatever.
to be olive oil, and it was olive oil, and it was even the first press olive oil, which it was supposed to be,
But it had to be
but
tahara.
it had been contaminated. So it was not tahar, but there is a concept of tuma hutra b'tzibur, that the laws of tuma are overridden for communal service.
Maybe it's because the impurity came not from mistake or accident, but it was done specifically to humiliate the tradition. They did it on purpose. They opened all of the canisters or whatever places where the pure oil was, just to prove that it's not the spiritual power that would actually
I
be
mean, I hear what
helpful
you're
to
saying.
them.
Rabbi,
It was just to make a point that they shouldn't
wasn't
win.
there a stamp, a special stamp put on these oils by the they
By
had
the
to
Kohen
be
Gadol,
stamped.
yes, absolutely. In the first place, of course, you were supposed to use pure oil. But if there's nothing else, then you're allowed to use impure oil. I'm not talking about using impure oil on a regular basis. I'm talking about if there's nothing else, then it's permissible. And that's why the question is, why would Hashem do that miracle?
But I think it's just another proof that it's not a power, it's not the amount of people who are fighting, but it is the support of the high power of the Hashem that matters. So it was just a tool. Oil was
symbolic, you're
not.
saying. It was
Yes,
symbolic
yes,
that Hashem was on our side, helping
right,
us in miraculous ways,
right,
Sheena. There was
right.
a
overcome the
Sheena behind.
impurity. I hear all of that. And the Rebbe says something that's not so different from that and from what you're all saying in different words. But there's two suggestions the Rebbe gives to answer the question. First of all, Hashem wanted to show his love for the Jewish people. He didn't want them to do a kind of, second best menorah lighting. It's not really pure, but it's okay. It's good enough. We're going to give you a heter, as they say in Hebrew. We're going to give you a permission slip. We'll let you get by on that. Hashem wanted to show that he loved the Jewish people and he desired their service to him, and he wanted them to be able to do it in the best possible way. And that's why he did that miracle. Similar but different answer is that when it comes to establishing the Beis Hamikdash in the first place, at that time, everything has to be pure. When you have a functioning Beis Hamikdash already, and then you have a little hiccup, and there's a problem with the purity, okay, it's a communal sacrifice, we can overlook it. But if you are establishing the holiness of the Beis Hamikdash, which is what was happening at that time, because the Greeks had contaminated the Beis Hamikdash, it had not been used to serve Hashem in some time. It was like a rededication and a new beginning for the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore the new beginning had to have only pure oil. When you establish something in the first place, that's when it has to be established on a bedrock of purity and the highest level of observance. This second interpretation also answers another question, which is there seems to be a dichotomy. Maybe paradox is a better word. There seems to be a paradox between different laws in terms of the conflict between Shabbos and building the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash. On the one hand, we say no building the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos. Not one of the 39 types of work can be done on Shabbos. And that's how we learn the whole concept of what you can't do on Shabbos. So in that sense, no, Shabbos is more important than the Beis Hamikdash. Yet, on a weekly basis, every single Shabbos in the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash, and in all the various forms of the Mishkan along the way until the Beis Hamikdash, they brought sacrifices on Shabbos. They brought the Ketoros. They brought the showbread. They brought the daily sacrifice. They brought the Musaf sacrifice. All of that involves what we would normally consider serious Shabbos violations: lighting fire, burning things, slaughtering things, roasting things, heavy Shabbos violations. Yet Hashem said to do it. It's in the Chumash, says you do it every day. And you do this on Shabbos, and do that on Shabbos. And the same Hashem that said to observe Shabbos everywhere else, that same Hashem said, okay, in the Beis Hamikdash, here's what you do. Okay, so that's what we do, but what's the concept? If you just finish saying that Shabbos is more important, so then Shabbos is more important. We should give all of these things a rest on Shabbos. And if the Beis Hamikdash is more important, so then why not build it on Shabbos? Excuse me. So this is all based on what we said before. The truth is that these particular services can be done on Shabbos. But when it comes to establishing the Beis Hamikdash as a whole, when it comes to bringing the holiness of Hashem into this world, that has to be done in a way that is perfect. No overriding of any rules whatsoever. Only the highest level, because that's when we're establishing a holy place for Hashem, it has to be in the highest level. Once it's established, so then Hashem says, okay, here's where you cut this corner, you cut that corner, this is more important than that, that's more important than this, and so on and so forth. So, coming back to the explanation of why they did not carry the torches on Shabbos, even though Ein Shvus B'Migdash, there is no rabbinic violation of Shabbos in the Beis Hamikdash. Concept is, now that we've explained that the inspection on a daily basis was not just a utilitarian inspection to make sure that nothing's missing and everything's in place, but it was rather a show of how holy the Beis Hamikdash is, how special it is, how we care for it. In that sense, it was almost like part of the building of the Beis Hamikdash, because this is what establishes it as a place of honor and respect. So that's almost like when they built the Beis Hamikdash, they did not desecrate the Shabbos at all, not Torah level, not rabbinic level. There was no building, zero. Everybody went home for Shabbos, came back on Sunday. So the same thing when it comes to this particular thing, which is not, a specific work that was done at the Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos, but it's rather a introduction to the whole service of the day and establishing the Beis Hamikdash as a place of holiness. That's something that we wanted, or the sages wanted, to be done in an absolutely kosher way, no desecration whatsoever, even rabbinic level desecration. And now we come to the Hasidische Wort. I know David is waiting for this. What's the Hasidische Wort? What's the takeaway? What can we learn from this? Since we are not Kohanim, or at least most of us are not Kohanim, we're not going to be, checking the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash anytime soon, with torches, without torches. It's good to learn about it and to hope for that time once again. But what can we take away and learn for our daily lives? So the Rebbe says that the allusion here of the Shabbos, especially right at the end of the building of the Beis Hamikdash, the laws of the building of the Beis Hamikdash, is an allusion to the Messianic era. The Messianic era is called the global Shabbos. Yom Shekuloi Shabbos Umenucha L'Chaye Ha'olam, the day of Shabbos and rest forever. When that day comes,
Rabbi, we lost you again.
when that day comes, we will have the third Beis Hamikdash, which will last forever. And the last law in the laws of the Beis Hamikdash is alluding to that time. When it comes to the day of Shabbos that's going to last forever, when it comes to the Messianic era, here is some information you have to know. You will not be able to light any lamps. All the lamps have to be lit before. Kiner mitzvah v'torah or. A lamp refers to a mitzvah. In the time of Mashiach, the mitzvahs will do them, but they will not be challenging. We will not have a yetzer hara. We will not have an evil inclination. So the mitzvahs we will do then will be not quite significant as the mitzvahs that we do now are. So all of the mitzvahs, in terms of the mitzvahs that we struggle with, that we have to put an effort into doing, all of those have to be lit before Shabbos. Because once Shabbos comes, you cannot light any new mitzvahs. The time of the challenge is over. So the Rambam is telling us we have to build our own Beis Hamikdash now. We have to make this world a dwelling place for Hashem now. We have to bring the light of Hashem into this world now, because now is the time when we can actually make that difference, when we can establish this as a dwelling place for Hashem. Once the time is up, once they have the checkered flag at the end of the race, once that flag is waving, we will not have that special opportunity anymore. You think things are hard, and you want to complain and say it's not fair, it's so hard, why does Hashem give me a hard time? So that is the whole point. The whole point is to have a hard time. The whole point is to have a challenge and to overcome that challenge. And that's what makes our service of Hashem meaningful. In the time of Mashiach, there will be no challenge. Everything will be great. We'll be blissing out the angels, the previous tzaddikim of all the generations, all the Rebbes, all the prophets. We're going to be having a farbrengen non-stop. It's going to be great fun, but it's not going to be challenging. Now is the era when we have challenges, and now is when it's up to us to really step up to the plate and overcome those challenges and serve Hashem despite them. Now is when we have to light the lamps. Okay, that's my inspiration. David, you have something inspiring for us?
No, but I can think of something. You want to give somebody else a
You usually
chance?
have something up your sleeve.
I know, but I wasn't ready.
Okay, any questions?
Did I mention last week about Kassis Labar, or we went through that already?
I think you did. It sounds familiar. The mimer, the Atat Tzava mimer.
So I can do it again if you, or Mordechai, you want to say? Mordechai, your audio is off.
Mordechai, go ahead. What do you have? What do you have for us?
You're muted,
Can't hear you.
Mordechai.
Rabbi,
Mordechai, you wanted to say something? Yes.
I just wanted to say there's a rabbi from the Beit Knesset that I used to attend. I asked him one time, I said, because I was just curious, based on the subject he was talking about, is Mashiach in Shemayim or Olam Haba? He said, it's a very good question, he says to me. So I didn't know what to make of that, Maybe
Right.
you can deduct from that. I don't know. From the response.
The simple understanding is that Mashiach is a human being that Hashem will tap when the time comes and say, hey, now is the time. And that in every generation there is such a person who is worthy of being tapped and told that. But there is also a concept in the Gemara that Mashiach might be somebody who's already passed away, and Hashem might bring him back to life to lead us. So that's really something that it's up to Hashem to decide at that time. But at least in the Rambam's description of it, it's a living human being who will simply fill the role when the time comes.
I'm not sure if Mordechai's talking to us, but he's muted out. You're Mordechai. You're muted out.
Who are David? Who are you? Is Mordecai trying to get through? Or?
I think so. He's still on
Can't
mute.
tell. I don't know.
He's talking. While he's waiting to come on, I could tell you something.
Yes, go ahead.
There's a story about the Baal Shem Tov, and I also read a similar thing regarding two other Rebbes, Rabbi Eli Melech Lovazinsk, and also Reb Zusha of Anapoli.
Yes.
And the original story with the Baal Shem Tov is he came to a shul and he said, this shul is filled with Torah and mitzvahs. It's filled with davening. So the people of the shul were very, very honored that the Baal Shem Tov should say such a thing, that their synagogue is full of davening. So he explained that he said in relationship to this, that it's so full of davening that he can't go in. So they thought it was a big compliment that he explained that it's not like that, because there's a bird, there's a symbolism of a bird that flies to heaven. And this bird has the two wings of love of God and awe of God. And this is what takes the prayers to soar aloft to heaven, to God. The problem is in this synagogue, people are lacking this, and therefore this bird doesn't fly aloft and take their prayers to God, because what's missing is the love of God and the awe of God. It's damaged. And therefore, the reason that I'm saying that the synagogue is full of prayers is because the prayers are not able to fly aloft to heavenwards, to Hashem. They're just sitting here in the synagogue because they're not able to be elevated to Hashem.
Yes. That's a good one. Very good, my friends. I wish you all a good Shabbos, and I look forward to seeing you next week with Hashem's help. This Shabbos is, by the way, Parshas Shkolim. I failed to mention that. That means we read an extra section about the half shekel because it's the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni, the second Adar. Okay.
Hey,
Thank you, Rabbi
All
Sitcher.
the best. My
Thank
pleasure.
you very
Rabbi.
much.
Mordechai's got his voice back.
Bye-bye.
Mordechai's got his voice back. Oh, he's not there. He is. Mordechai, were you trying to say something before?
No, I wasn't.
Oh,
Okay.
Thank you,
Very
Rabbi.
good. All the best. My
Good day,
pleasure.
everybody.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.